When we returned to Shitsugumi headquarters, Sanan had a number of words for us. They weren't particularly pleasant. We had been kneeling for some time as the colonel berated us before Okita finally spoke up.
そんなに怒ることないじゃないですか。僕たちは長州の患者を捕まえてきたわけだし。
Why he got words for me though? I didn't do anything wrong. When the fight was over, we discovered a massive arms cache and confiscated the entire thing. No one had bothered to explain to me what was happening, however, and I was utterly lost. So I don't understand why I'm here getting berated along with Okita.
怒ることではない。沖田くんは面白いことを言いますね。マスやキエモンと身分を偽っている人間は長州の患者である古高俊太郎だった。我々新選組はその事実を知った上で彼を泳がせていた。
その通りですけど、でも捕まえるしかない状況だったんですよ。
His excuse was weak, and his petulant frown suggested he knew it.
ま、宗司の言う通り、ある意味では大手柄だろうな。
でも古高を泳がせるために頑張ってた島田君や山崎君に悪いと思わないわけ？
The corners of Hesuge's mouth twitched into a momentary smile. Shimada interrupted before he could continue.
東堂君の気持ちもありがたいが、我々のことはあまり気にせんでください。私らも古高に対して手詰まりでしたから、沖田君たちが動いてくれて助かりましたよ。
Yamazaki nodded in silent agreement.
古高捕獲はすでに済まされた事柄です。その結果に不満を述べるつもりはありません。
Yamazaki looked kinda cool.
お前ら首相な奴らだね。それに引き換え掃除は。
Stop talking about Soji. Soji got stuff done. Leave him alone. It didn't look like Nagakura was going to let Okita get away without thoroughly rubbing his face in his mistake. At last, I felt I could remain quiet no longer. It was my fault, was it? Some Ronin was causing trouble, so I tried to get out of the way. I got separated from Okita in the crowd, and I didn't go right back to him. Before I really realized what was going on, there I was in front of Masu's, and someone was shouting about how I was with the Shetsengumi.
君への監督不行き届きは誰の責任ですか?
Okay, I see how it could have been my fault, maybe. He glared at me, his eyes hard and angry, and I felt my throat dry up.
一番組組長が監視対象を見失うなど、全く情けないこともあったものですね。
When I'd first met him, Sanan had been nice, if a little quiet. After his injury, however, it was as if he'd become an entirely different man.
外出を許可したのは俺だ。こいつらばかり責めないでやってくれ。
Sanan looked up at Hijikata as he walked into the room. He gave the commander a tight, wry smile, but got only a peaceful, impartial glance in return.
土方さんが来たってことは、古高の拷問も終わったんですか?
Can I go back to my room now? Hijikata didn't so much as blink.
風の強い日を選んで今日の都に火を放ち、あわよくば天皇を長州へ連れ出す。それが奴らの目的だ。
His voice was calm and measured, but we all felt the import of his words.
町に火を放つだ。長州の奴ら、頭のネジが緩んでるんじゃねえの?
He followed this comment with a rude gesture that made me blush involuntarily.
それ単に天使様を誘拐するってことだろ? そんなを掲げてるくせに全然敬ってねえじゃん。
何にしろ見過ごせるものではない。
I can ignore the plans. This ain't got nothing to do with me. Can I go back to my room, please?
奴らの会合は今夜行われる可能性が高い。 てめえらも出動準備を整えておけ。
Y'all need to move out. I can stay in. Then again, going out might be fun.
了解しました、副長。
Yeah, can I come too? That might be fun.
よっしゃ、腕が鳴るぜ。
They didn't all display the same level of professionalism, but each man made it clear that he was prepared. As they quieted down, Hijikata turned towards me as if he had only just noticed my presence.
ああ、それから行動さんの件だが、長州の者と松屋に来たことがあるらしい。
What? He was with the Chosu? But my father was loyal to the shogunate. That was why the Shinsengumi had agreed to help me look for him. But the Chosu are at odds with the shogun. Why would my father be with them? But no one had an answer for me. Preparations for the raid began immediately. Within moments, the compound was a beehive of activity, with soldiers and officers running back and forth. The tension was thick enough to cut it with a dull knife, and I found it was affecting me, despite my best efforts. My encounter at Masu's had created new problems for them, and I hoped I might be able to help out to make up for it. But how was I supposed to help prepare for a raid? There was nothing for me to do but sit in my room, though. I felt terrible and useless for doing it. Still, I told myself best to avoid getting in anyone's way. As I sat there doing my best to think of anything else, I heard voices nearby.
動ける隊士が足りていない。近藤さんの隊は10名で動くそうだ。
俺ら土方さんの隊は24人だったが、隊士の半分が腹痛って笑えないよな。
That didn't seem to be keeping Harada from laughing, though. If I was correct, Kondo would be taking his men to the Ikeda Inn, and Hijikata would be taking his to Shikoku Inn.
そういえば、あいつらは使わないのか。夜の任務だし、うってつけだと思うんだが。
Them?
お前らが減らしたけど、まだ何人か残ってるはずだろ。
しばらく実戦から遠ざけるらしい。調整に手間取っていると聞いたが。血に触れるたび、俺たちの指示も聞かずに狂われてはたまらん。
What? I swore I heard something about a reaction to blood before. No, this was something I wasn't supposed to hear. Did they not realize I was there? If they didn't, I could have hardly announced my presence after what I'd heard.
奴らも浮かばれねえな。戦うために選んだ道だろうに。
サノ、浮かばれないという表現は死んだ者に対して使うものだろう。
ああ、別に死んでねえよな。むしろめったなことじゃ死なねえし。
There was no doubt that what I was hearing was not meant for me. I shoved my fingers into my ears and closed my eyes tight. The best I could do was make sure I didn't hear anything more. But like, it's their fault, cause how do I keep hearing these secrets that I'm not supposed to hear? They need to get better at keeping secrets. This is not my fault. Get better at keeping secrets, okay?
雪村君、こんなところで何をしているのかね?
My eyes flew open to see Kondo standing in front of me. I couldn't just sit there. I told him the truth about how I'd felt so useless and left my room to find some way to help.
君の気持ちはよくわかる。打ち入り前でみんなも高揚しているしな。
Yes. Excited? I would have said bloodthirsty.
どうかね。君も一緒に来るか。
What? That was not what I expected him to say. You mean to go on a raid with you? I don't know what I could.
伝令役になってもらえるとありがたいんだが、もちろん君に無理はさせん。
Of course, the chief was only taking 10 soldiers. Well, all right. If I'll just be a messenger. His face split into a grin, and that was how I found myself on the way to the Okita Inn to accompany the Shinsengumi on their raid. Finally, I'll be useful. Not like I ever wanted to be a freeloader. Hour of the Dog. After we arrived at Ikeda, I was sent off on several short errands nearby. I returned to hear Nagakura talking to Okita.
こっちが当たりか。まさか長州藩邸のすぐ裏で会合とはな。
僕は最初からこっちだと思ってたけど、奴らは今までも頻繁に池田屋を使ったし。
だからって古高が捕まった晩にわざわざ普段と同じ場所で集まるか？普通は場所を変えるだろう。常識的に考えて。
じゃあ、奴らには常識がなかったんだね。実際こうして池田屋で会合してるわけだし。
But for the subject matter, it could have been any conversation between Nagakura and Okita. Perhaps the Chosu were trying to trick the Shinsengumi? I certainly wouldn't have known. Whatever the reason for their behavior, however, it didn't seem to have Nagakura or Okita particularly worried. Tesuke noticed me as I approached and jogged over.
どうだった？会津藩とか諸次第の役にまだ来てなかった？
Well, to be honest, I didn't really see much of anyone nearby. He frowned and grunted unhappily to himself.
日暮れ頃にはとっくに連絡してたってのに、まだ動いてないとか何やってんだよ。
落ち着けよ、平助。
The larger man smacked Tesuke playfully on the shoulder with a bark of
あ
laughter.
んな奴ら役に立たねえんだから、来ても来なくても一緒だろ。
だけどさ、新八さん。俺らだけで突入とか無謀だと思わねえの？
His words must have made sense to someone because we decided to wait for reinforcements. We waited for quite some time, but they never appeared. Hour of the Boar. I looked up at the sky. The moon had moved a good part of its way across the sky since we'd arrived at Okita Inn.
さすがに、これはちょっと遅すぎるな。
近藤さん、どうします？これでミスミス逃しちゃったら無様ですよ。
The chief had been quiet for the last several hours, but when Okita spoke, he stood up and laid his hand on my shoulder.
雪村君、少し池田屋から離れていてくれるか？
Uh-oh.
ここは危険だ。老子が降りてくるかもしれん。もっとも逃がすつもりはないがな。
Then he stood up, gave a smile, and ran into the inn.
会津中将お預かり老子隊新選組、戦議のため宿内を改める。
The words were scarcely out of his mouth when a cacophony. The heck is that word? Cacophony? The words were out of his mouth when a cacophony of yells and screams erupted out at the inn.
わざわざ大声で討ち入りを知らせちゃうとか、すごく近藤さんらしいよね。
Okita gave a bark of laughter as he made his own way toward the inn.
いいんじゃねえの？正々堂々名乗りを上げる。それが討ち入りの定石ってもんだ。
自分をわざわざ不利な状況に追い込むのが新八さんの言う定石。
Hesuke and Nagakura grinned at one another as they too sauntered towards the inn.
御用改めである。手向かいすれば容赦なく切り捨てる。
Then the battle began in earnest. The yells of men and the clang of swords filled the air, rolling out through the doors and windows of the inn. I could hear feet pound upstairs and screams of men dying, the wet thud of bodies dropping to the floor. I mean, there's me. Well, there was someone, but all the men who'd come with the captains had run around to go in the back and couldn't hear Nagakura. Even if they could have, I heard sounds of battle coming from the back of the inn as well. What should I do? The only person left to go help them was me. But even if I did, what could I do? That was when I heard Kondo. Then Nagakura called out from a different part of the inn. Oh no! I had no desire to go into a building full of men trying their best to kill one another. Even if I did, I had no illusions about my skill for blade. I was sure to be killed before I'd even drawn it. But I could hardly sit by and do nothing. Perhaps if I couldn't fight, I could rescue the wounded, find them and carry them out of the inn? My mind made up, I stilled myself and ran inside. Inside the inn. Inside, it was pitch black. The smell of blood hit me in the stomach like a fist. Wah! The air reeked of it. There were dark lumps on the floor everywhere. The bodies of fallen men. Their bodies hit the floor. Where were Okita and Hesuke? And it sounded like a good idea at the time, but as I looked around that charnel house, I realized that there was no way I could possibly carry 2 men outside. I have to choose. So like, at this point, I'm still thinking, I don't know, I guess I'll go for the Okita route maybe? I don't know. I'm gonna look for Okita though. I decided I had to look for Okita, because I was thinking about doing his route. I knew I'd cause trouble for him during the afternoon patrols, but he never called me out on it. It seemed only fair that I try to return a favor in some way. A Ronin exploded out of nowhere, falling down the stairs and screaming. My Kodachi was in my hand before I realized I'd drawn it. He was halfway up when Kondo's sword slid through his heart. A lot of help I was. I just watched the man die. Why did I even run in here? Fighting? Dying? I don't know. He did his best to keep his tone calm, but I could tell my appearance had both surprised and worried him. You know what? If nothing else, I'll look for Okita and put a band-aid on his cuts. I don't know. Yes, sir. I nodded quickly and ran off through the carnage. He's upstairs. I took them 2 at a time and landed hard on the top floor. Not the way I walk up steps, but I mean, if you're in a rush. It didn't take long to spot him. Oh! Only feet from me was Okita, locked in battle with a Ronin. I felt my stomach lurch. The cold ring of steel against steel tore through the air, and their blades flashed lines of light in the darkness. Okay, so as I've said, I've played this game before on the PSP. I'm not about to spoil anything. I don't even remember everything about the game, but let's just say that this dude right here is my favorite character. Just putting it out there. The strange Ronin's eyes narrowed and his mouth curved into a smug smile. I'd seen Okita train with the soldiers, and his skill with a blade had been clear, but this Ronin, my favorite character. The way he dodged, parried, and slowly drove Okita back seemed almost lazy. The blood and violence that was choking the inn had no effect on him, it seemed. He was so peaceful, in fact, that he hardly looked as though he belonged in the middle of all that carnage. A smile split his face for a second. A smile split his face for half a second, not a full second, and then he launched himself at the Ronin. Their swords slammed together. I hadn't watched them fight for long, but to my untrained eye, it looked as though the Ronin was a self-taught swordsman. His sword moved in large, crude arcs, while Okita responded with skill and finesse. In a contest of skill, Okita would have been the clear winner, but as their blades sprang apart, it was always Okita who found himself pushed back. The Ronin's sword was heavy but fast. It was clear that he was Okita's superior in raw power. and looks. The summer heat had turned the air thick and humid. I could barely breathe. Sweat poured down my spine and headed on my face as fast as I could wipe it off. I don't know what to do. I want to distract him because he just looks so cool. I decided to distract him. Nearby, a bowl sat unattended to the floor. If I could use that to distract the Ronin for a moment, I knew that it would give Okita the opening he needed. I trusted him. With every ounce of strength I had, I hurled the bowl straight at the Ronin, just so the Ronin would look my way, really. I'm not even trying to save Okita. I'm just trying to get the Ronin to look my way. That's really it. Almost without thinking, he turned his blade and smashed the bowl to the floor. The moment of distraction gave Okita his opening. I don't know, good for Okita, I guess. He leapt forward. Even caught off guard, the Ronin managed to get his blade up in time, but the blow sent him stumbling back a step or two, an angry look on his face. As Okita lifted his sword to point it at his opponent, his beautiful, handsome opponent, he whispered in a voice so quiet only I could hear it. Alright, fine. I'll take those points. I'll take those relationship points. That's fine. I knew now wasn't the time to bring up the relationship points I just got, but I was happy to know I'd been able to help. The strange Ronin's sword whipped through the air. Little more than a silvery blur, Okita caught each blow as best as he could, but a particularly powerful strike from above was too much for his skill to counter, and he stumbled. Though he might not have shared Okita's skill, the Ronin was no fool, and Okita had given him an opening even a child could exploit. The Ronin's foot connected with the center of Okita's chest. Whatever the source of his tremendous strength was, it was apparently enough to make my remote vibrate. And it was also apparently extended to his legs as well as his sword arm. I thought I heard a wet crunch as the kick connected, and Okita tumbled across the floor of the room. When at last he stopped, I saw him grip his chest with one hand and cough. Blood. Okita! I leapt across the room like a ballerina. Are you alright? His face was as tight with pain. I don't think he was alright, and the most he seemed able to manage were labored gasps and wet, teary coughs. Definitely not alright. Okita was in no condition to fight or live. As I struggled to move myself under his arm to lift him up, I glared at the strange Ronin. Is that Nanami's voice? Nanami from Jujutsu Kaisen? I'm gonna look that up. I'm gonna look that up probably because I need to know. Because it kind of sounds like him. It really do. I watched the tip of his blade drift up to point straight at me. With a groan of pain, Okita lifted himself up and stumbled between me and the Ronin. Don't be a hero, Okita! No, Okita, you can't! Don't hurt him, he's so cool! No. Like as if he could hurt him. Okita's the one that's about to die. There was a good chance he had broken bones, and if he was coughing up blood, then his internal organs could be damaged as well. He could barely stand, let alone fight, and he had to have known it just as well as I did. But he stood firm. I don't know how old my character is, but there's no way that she's that far apart in age from him, right? The Ronin sneered. As he shouted, new flecks of blood appeared on Okita's lips. Stop that! You're still coughing up blood. That's not normal. It's not healthy. The Ronin regarded us with cool, disinterested eyes for a few moments, then in one smooth motion lifted his sword and slid it home into his scabbard. Slid it home into his scabbard. Is that... I don't know, there's something really funny about that wording. He slid it home! Something really funny about that wording. Like, I wonder if you could just use that in just any, like, instance. Like, you're putting a cup away. It's like, he slid the cup home into the cupboard. Like, can you say that? Like, I've never heard anybody say that before. But now I want to say it all the time. Whatever. What? Oh, so you're leaving. I mean, I think that's supposed to be a good thing, but like, maybe don't leave? His voice was as cool and as aloof as his eyes. So cool. He lifted one foot to the broken windowsill and leapt out into the thick night air. He ran. No, he hadn't run. He was letting us go. No, you can't. At this point, just fight to live. Just fight to stay alive. That's the only fight you need to do. You don't need to get in any more battles right about now, though. Okita. His voice was weak, like me. Why did you do that? Okita turned his head to look at me. No, I said you'd try to kill me if I got in your way. So why had he protected me with his tsundere behind? He raised a shaky eyebrow. His words were already beginning to slur. Just let it go, Okita. Just let it go. Okita! His eyes fluttered and his body sort of folded as he collapsed to the floor. Huh? I've been so worried about Okita I hadn't noticed. The sounds of screaming men and clattering swords had disappeared. Is it over? The moment the swords were out of my mouth. I mean, the moment the words were out of my mouth, not the swords. Why would there be swords in my mouth? That's stupid. The moment the words were out of my mouth, I heard the sound of labored footsteps on the stairs. And then the sun came up. The raid itself had lasted only 2 hours, but for me, at least it had felt for longer. There had been 20 Imperial nationalists at the Okita Inn. The Shinsengumi had killed 7 Ronin and injured 4 more. I learned later that with the help of the Aizu domain and the Kyoto Judiciary Commissioner, they had arrested 23 people. The owner of the Okita Inn or whatever had also been arrested for trying to help the Chosu rebels escape. The Shinsengumi had won an incredible victory fighting against superior numbers in enemy territory, but they had paid dearly for it, dearly. Okita had taken a blow to the chest and lost consciousness. Hesuke had been cut on the forehead, and the bleeding refused to stop. Can't stop, won't stop. Nagakura had injured his left hand. One of the Shinsengumi soldiers had lost his life at the end's rear entrance, and 2 others had been severely injured there as well. It didn't seem likely that they would survive. The Kyoto military and judiciary commissioners, run by the Aizu and Kawana domains respectively, had also fought Chosu Ronin. With their successful resolution of the Battle of Ikeda and the Shinsengumi had last made a name for themselves. Man, I can't read. It looked as though the peace in Kyoto had been protected. Never could I have imagined what the ultimate result of their victory at the Okita Inn would be. August 1864.